You don't lose focus while working. You lose it before you even begin.
It is, it's a pretty brutal reality to face.
It really is. I mean, think about it. I think this is a scenario you've definitely experienced. You sit down at your desk, right?
Mm.
You've got your coffee right next to your keyboard. You've cleared your workspace. You are totally ready to just crush your to-do list.
And then absolutely nothing happens.
Nothing. Your brain just flatlines. You stare at the screen. You're clicking between like 3 different browser tabs without actually reading a single word on any of them.
Yeah, you pick up your phone, put it face down, and then, pick it right back up 30 seconds later.
Exactly. And you're just left sitting there with a strange, heavy mix of physical exhaustion and professional guilt.
Right.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into the invisible ways we sabotage our own concentration before we even sit down to work.
Because it is a pervasive issue. And what's truly fascinating, or maybe comforting, is that this paralysis, it's not a personal failing.
It feels like one, though.
Oh, it definitely feels like one. But it's actually a highly predictable outcome. It's driven by biological and environmental design.
So our attention doesn't just evaporate at the desk.
No, not at all. It is systematically dismantled. And it happens through a series of hidden traps you walk through every single morning.
Okay, so to figure out how this dismantling happens, we're going to weave together a really compelling stack of research today.
We have some fantastic sources to pull from.
Yeah, we're looking at an empirical study out of the Central University of Punjab that tracked how university students handle digital distraction. We've got organizational insights from Atlassian regarding the cognitive drain of decision fatigue.
We're also exploring the fundamental physics of human attention via Wikipedia's psychology archives.
Right, and we've got a very revealing piece from Stanford University's Student Affairs on a concept called sleep procrastination. Plus, to figure out how to actually survive all of this, we're drawing on productivity articles by Hugh Culver and the team at Skill Oxide.
It's a broad stack. But when you look at these sources collectively, whether we're analyzing college students in India or executives in Silicon Valley, you see the exact same neurological patterns.
The human brain is just responding to the stimuli of the modern morning.
And it's responding in ways that actively destroy its ability to do deep work later in the day.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to map out this invisible gauntlet. We want to understand the underlying mechanics,
Yeah.
the literal neuroscience and biology of why your focus gets hijacked so easily.
And then, importantly, we'll use these sources to help you build a proactive routine, a cognitive firewall, essentially.
Because your attention is your most precious asset.
Yeah.
So to start, I realized reading through this research that if you want to understand why you're staring blankly at your monitor at 9 a.m., you actually have to rewind the clock significantly.
You really do. You have to rewind all the way to the night before.
Which is so counterintuitive.
It is, because we have this culturally ingrained habit of viewing focus as a desk-bound activity. We assume it's just a switch we can flip the moment we sit in our ergonomic chairs.
Right, like I'm at work now, time to focus.
Exactly. But your capacity for sustained attention is heavily dictated by the biological and psychological baseline you establish before your morning alarm ever sounds.
Which brings us to a concept from the Stanford Student Affairs piece that felt honestly almost uncomfortably familiar when I read it.
I think everyone relates to this one.
Yeah, they call it revenge bedtime procrastination, or RBP.
It's an incredibly common phenomenon, and the psychology behind it is quite profound.
Break it down for us. What exactly is the revenge part?
So, revenge bedtime procrastination occurs when an individual feels they lack sufficient leisure time or autonomy during their waking hours.
Okay.
Think about your typical day. You're commuting, you're working, you're responding to emails, running errands, fulfilling family obligations.
You're basically on the clock for everyone else.
Precisely. Your entire day is dictated by the needs and schedules of other people. So by the time the evening rolls around and you finally have a moment to yourself, you're physically and mentally exhausted.
Right, you know you should sleep.
Your body is actively signaling for sleep, but psychologically, you refuse.
You retaliate against your own schedule.
Yes. You stay awake at night to catch up on the free time you were denied during the day. It's an act of psychological revenge to reclaim a sense of control over your own existence.
You're effectively telling your schedule, I didn't get to own my time today, so I'm going to own my night, even if I know it's going to hurt me tomorrow.
That's exactly it. And if you look at how that revenge typically manifests, it's rarely productive or restful leisure.
No, I'm definitely not like painting watercolors or reading complex literature at midnight.
Right. People experiencing RBP are engaging in low-effort, high-stimulation activities. They're doom scrolling,
Oh, the doom scrolling.
falling down YouTube rabbit holes, or swiping through TikTok and Instagram for hours in the dark.
And that specific choice of activity, right?
Mm.
Staring at a glowing rectangle in a dark room, that is where the biological sabotage really kicks into high gear, isn't it?
It's the catalyst for the entire cascade of focus loss the next day. The electronic devices we use emit blue light.
And our brains do not like blue light at night.
Well, from an evolutionary perspective, human biology relies heavily on light to regulate our circadian rhythm. That's our internal clock.
Yeah.
For millennia, the fading of natural light signaled to the brain that it was time to release melatonin. That's the hormone that facilitates sleep.
So when you hold a smartphone, like 6 inches from your face at 11:30 at night,
The blue light receptors in your eyes send a signal to your pineal gland that the sun is still high in the sky.
wow. So you are actively suppressing the exact hormone you need to recover from the day,
You're shutting down the melatonin production line completely, and this doesn't just make it harder to fall asleep, it degrades the actual architectural quality of the sleep you do eventually get.
meaning you don't sleep as deeply.
Exactly. You're robbing your brain of the restorative cycles needed to repair cognitive functioning. You are trading tomorrow's mental clarity for a false sense of autonomy tonight.
That sets up a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Which leads right into another finding from the Health and Me source. They discuss a term called social jet lag.
Yes, coined by chronobiologist Till Romanberg.
Right, and their claim is that even if you haven't been near an airport, millions of people wake up on Monday morning feeling literally jet lagged.
It perfectly encapsulates the severe mismatch between your biological clock, what your body naturally wants to do, and your social clock.
The social clock being the schedule dictated by your job or school.
Right. And the data on how widespread this is just blew me away.
It's staggering. The Health and Me article points out that nearly 80% of people experience irregular sleep by shifting their sleep and wake times drastically between weekdays and weekends.
80%.
Most of the population is essentially flying across multiple time zones every single weekend without ever leaving their bedrooms.
And the physiological toll of that weekly time travel is immense. The Health and Me source highlights data specifically from India to illustrate the severity of this crisis.
Yeah, that data was really eye-opening.
A local circles survey found that 55% of Indians get less than 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep a night. And this isn't a static number.
It's getting worse.
It's an increase from the year prior. The sleep debt is compounding nationally.
And the Fitbit Global Sleep Analysis they cited backs this up even further. It places India as the second most sleep-deprived population in the world, just behind Japan.
Averaging just over 7 hours a night. But the most alarming detail is the quality. They get the lowest amount of vital REM sleep globally.
Okay, let's dig into that mechanism. Why is lacking REM sleep so catastrophic for someone trying to focus at a desk on a Tuesday morning?
Well, REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, is fundamentally the brain's processing and filing period.
Like a hard drive defragging.
Very similar. During the day, you absorb an incredible amount of information, but it's stored somewhat haphazardly in short-term memory. During REM sleep, your brain actively consolidates those memories, moving them from short-term holding into long-term storage. It's also the phase where profound emotional regulation occurs.
So if you're cutting your REM sleep short because of social jet lag or revenge bedtime procrastination, your brain literally hasn't finished filing away yesterday's paperwork.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Your working memory is still cluttered.
No wonder it feels so hard to think.
Exactly. You wake up cognitively impaired and emotionally volatile because the neurological housekeeping just wasn't completed. But the damage of social jet lag goes far beyond just memory consolidation.
Right, there's a whole chemical side to this. The hormonal chaos it induces is staggering.
Yeah.
Break that hormonal chaos down for us.
Sure.
Because I think we all understand that poor sleep makes us tired, but the mechanics of what it does to our actual biology seem much more insidious.
It is. When you delay your internal clock through late-night light exposure and irregular weekend sleeping, you don't just confuse your melatonin and cortisol levels.
Which is bad enough.
Right. But you severely disrupt the hormones that regulate your metabolism and appetite. Specifically, chronic sleep deprivation reduces the production of leptin.
And leptin is what?
Leptin is the hormone responsible for signaling satiety. It tells your brain that you're full.
Okay, so the I'm full Signal just gets muted,
Completely muted. And simultaneously, it increases the production of ghrelin.
which I assume does the opposite.
Yes. Ghrelin is the hormone that triggers hunger.
Oh. So this explains the midnight munchies. When I stay up late scrolling, I inevitably find myself in the kitchen looking for carbohydrates.
It's a classic symptom.
It isn't just a lack of willpower then. My brain is actively flooding my system with a chemical demanding I eat.
It's an evolutionary survival mechanism misfiring. Your body interprets the prolonged state of wakefulness, especially when you should be sleeping, as a sign of distress or an emergency.
Like I'm staying awake to run from a predator.
Precisely. It assumes you are awake because you need to survive a threat, so it demands quick, accessible energy, intense cravings for sugar, and simple carbohydrates. And over time, this chronic hormonal confusion leads to metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, and weight gain.
That's terrifying.
Your entire physiology is operating in a state of low-grade, constant stress.
Let me try to visualize this baseline state. It sounds to me like we're treating our physical bodies the way we would treat a smartphone that we stubbornly refuse to plug in overnight.
I like that analogy.
We stay up playing games on it, we drain the battery down to the red zone, we fall asleep with it unplugged on the nightstand, and then the alarm rings.
And the battery is sitting at 12%.
Right, 12%. But we still expect the phone to run heavy applications at 100% capacity for a 9-hour workday.
Which is impossible.
Is this why that Monday morning feeling is so visceral? Because we're starting the week already bankrupt on energy.
That captures the reality perfectly. You're starting your workday with a baseline of deep exhaustion, and here is the critical pivot.
Okay.
Because you're starting out with a depleted battery, the fundamental way your brain operates shifts.
How so?
When you are deeply sleep-deprived and socially jet-lagged, your brain is desperate for an easy, low-effort energy boost. It lacks the resources to generate internal motivation, so it seeks external stimulation.
And that desperation leads us right into the first trap of the actual morning.
The morning digital binge.
You wake up groggy, your brain is screaming for an energy fix, and the absolute easiest, lowest friction source of stimulation available to modern humans is sitting right there on the nightstand.
The simple act of reaching for the smartphone before you have even left your bed. It is arguably the most destructive habit you can engage in if your goal is daily productivity.
The sources from Hugh Culver and the Skill Oxide team are both incredibly aggressive about this point.
They don't toll any punches.
Not at all. They point out the absolute toxicity of checking your phone, opening your email, or turning on a streaming service first thing in the morning.
And Hugh Culver provides some statistics on email usage that are genuinely terrifying.
Oh, the inbox stats, yeah. He points out that the average office worker burns through 1/3 of their entire day just managing email.
He quantifies it as roughly 11.7 hours a week, or about 14.6 weeks a year, dedicated solely to the inbox.
Over 14 weeks a year. That is a massive percentage of your finite life spent reading and sorting messages.
And the real kicker from his research, 30% of those emails are neither urgent nor important.
They're just administrative noise.
Exactly, which forces us to ask a difficult question.
Right.
If we know that the inbox is largely filled with non-urgent demands and administrative noise, why do we compulsively reach for it the second we open our eyes?
It makes no logical sense.
It doesn't. Why do we subject ourselves to it? If we look at the underlying neuroscience, this is not a logical choice. It is a Pavlovian response driven by the neurotransmitter dopamine.
Dopamine is a word that gets thrown around a lot in pop science, right?
Yeah.
We usually hear it described simply as the pleasure chemical.
Yes, constantly.
But in this context, it's doing something much more specific, isn't it?
Calling it the pleasure chemical is a dangerous oversimplification. Dopamine is primarily the neurotransmitter of anticipation, motivation, and reward-seeking behavior.
Motivation and seeking.
Yes. From an evolutionary standpoint, dopamine is what motivated our ancestors to forage for food or seek out social bonds essential for tribal survival.
Okay.
It rewards the pursuit of things necessary to keep us alive.
But I'm not foraging for berries in my bed at 7 a.m.
No, but as Hugh Culver notes, drawing on the work of psychologist Kelly McGonigal, the brain's reward system has adapted to our modern environment.
So the wiring is the same, but the triggers change.
The neurological circuitry hasn't changed at all, but the targets have. Today, your brain interprets the acquisition of novel information, a news headline, a social media like, a new email, as a vital resource.
It treats an email like a meal.
It craves notifications and social validation with the exact same intensity that an ancient human craved a high-calorie meal. That is wild to think about. When I see that little red notification badge on an app, my brain is deploying the same chemical cocktail it would if I just found a fresh water source.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you give in to that craving first thing in the morning, when you unlock your phone or turn on the morning news, as the skill oxide piece warns against, you are delivering a massive, entirely unearned hit of dopamine to your brain.
Unearned. That feels like a key word.
It is.
Because I didn't have to do any deep work or solve any complex problems to get that dopamine. I just had to swipe my thumb.
Exactly.
What's the physical danger of giving the brain that unearned hit right away? Shouldn't a burst of dopamine make me feel awake and motivated for the day?
You would think so, but the danger lies in how it recalibrates your baseline for the rest of the day.
Recalibrates it how?
By flooding your neural pathways with cheap, easily accessible dopamine within minutes of waking up, you're essentially priming your brain for distractions.
Oh, I see. The brain is an incredibly efficient organ. It learns quickly. If you teach it at 7 a.m. that it can experience a massive reward simply by scrolling through a feed, it is going to strongly resist doing difficult, complex work at 10 a.m.
Why do the hard work of writing a proposal when I know I can just open a new tab and get a free hit of dopamine?
Precisely. You have set a chemical precedent. For the rest of the workday, your brain will constantly crave more of those cheap, easy hits.
So you ruin your focus for the whole day.
You've effectively numbed your capacity for sustained focus before you have even eaten breakfast.
It's like eating a giant bowl of pure processed sugar for breakfast, and then wondering why you crash and have zero appetite for a healthy salad at lunch.
A perfect parallel.
You've ruined your cognitive appetite for real, sustained work. But beyond the neurochemistry, checking the phone in bed fundamentally shifts your psychological posture for the entire day.
It does. It forces an immediate transition from a proactive state to a reactive state.
Skill Oxide discusses this at length. They call it operating on autopilot mode.
Yes. If you wake up and the very first action you take is to look at your notifications, you are instantly serving the agenda of other people.
Your fresh morning thoughts, your own ideas, whatever creative energy you manage to muster, all of that is immediately hijacked.
Hijacked by the needs, demands, and perceived crises of whoever emailed or messaged you while you were asleep.
You've surrendered the protection of your own time. But wait, I want to push back on this a little because I know there are listeners thinking exactly what I'm thinking.
Go for it.
Isn't checking my email first thing just being a responsible, reliable professional?
That's the common defense, yes.
Like if my manager emails me at 6:30 a.m. with a question and I stubbornly refuse to look at it until 9 a.m., I might miss a crucial pivot. Where's the line between being an informed employee and letting your focus get hijacked?
That is a very valid concern, and it comes down to the concept of intentionality and the physical capacity to act.
Okay, unpack that.
There is a profound distinction between an intentional schedule review of your communications when you are at your desk ready to work and a reactive, dopamine-driven scroll while you're still lying horizontally in bed.
Context matters.
Hugely. When you read a stressful email from your manager while under the covers, you usually aren't in a position to actually execute the task.
That makes so much sense. I can read an email from a client asking for a complex revision, but I can't actually do the revision until I get to my laptop.
Exactly. So what you're really doing is just downloading their anxiety and carrying it with you into the shower.
I'm just marinating in stress while I brush my teeth.
You're absorbing the stress without the ability to resolve it. And this perfectly illustrates a powerful psychological phenomenon mentioned in the Skill Oxide article.
The Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect.
I love the mechanics of this concept. How does this work?
It's named after psychologist Bloom Zeigarnik. And it states that the human mind remembers uncompleted or interrupted tasks significantly better than completed ones. In the context of our digital mornings, every single notification you glance at, every news alert you read, every email subject line you scan but don't immediately resolve.
Each of these opens a mental loop in your cognitive background.
It opens a loop. And the brain does not like open loops.
The brain despises them.
Right. It creates a state of psychological tension. The brain desperately wants to close the loop to relieve that tension.
So, if you casually check your phone in the morning and see 3 unread text messages from a friend, a news alert about an economic downturn, and 2 vaguely worded work emails, you've just opened 6 discrete mental loops.
And your brain is now going to dedicate background processing power to keep those 6 loops active and present until you finally sit down and address them.
That sounds exhausting.
It creates an overwhelming, invisible psychological pull. It drains your willpower. You are exhausting your cognitive resources just trying to manage the tension of these unresolved issues.
And you haven't even officially started your workday. You're just swimming in open loops.
Swimming in them.
So if we take a step back and recap where we are at this exact moment in the morning timeline.
Let's do a wellness check.
Yeah. We're physically sleep-deprived and hormonally imbalanced
Yeah.
due to revenge, bedtime procrastination, and social jet lag.
Mm-hmm.
We woke up, flooded our brains with unearned dopamine, and opened half a dozen tension-filled Zygarnik loops by scanning our inboxes.
And you still have to get dressed and commute.
Which brings us to the next massive drain on our pre-work focus. Because your brain is already compromised, but you still have to navigate the physical morning routine.
You still have to get ready for the day.
And this introduces a silent killer for concentration. Trivial decision-making.
To truly grasp why making simple choices in the morning is so destructive to our later focus, we first have to understand the hard physical limits of human attention.
And the Wikipedia source on attention management provides incredible foundational context here.
It does, referencing the work of economist and cognitive psychologist Herbert A. Simon.
Simon famously pointed out that in an information-rich world, information is not the scarce resource.
Right.
Attention is the scarce resource. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention.
Because human beings simply cannot physically digest the volume of data available to us, our attention is strictly limited by the processing power of the biological brain.
And the Wikipedia article cites some fascinating estimates on this from psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and an engineer Robert Lucky.
They estimate the processing capacity of the human conscious mind is roughly 120 bits of information per second.
120 bits per second. Let's make that tangible for the listener. What does 120 bits actually look like in daily life?
To put it in perspective, actively listening to one person speak and truly comprehending their meaning requires about 60 bits per second of processing power.
Okay, so right now, as I'm listening to you explain this, I am utilizing half of my total conscious cognitive capacity just to process your words.
Yes, which is why you can barely comprehend 2 people speaking to you simultaneously. Doing so would completely max out your 120-bit limit.
Your brain would just crash.
Essentially, our short-term memory operates under similar tight constraints. It can reliably hold only about 3 to 4 items or chunks of information at any given time.
But here's the paradox. The Wikipedia piece also quotes a physiologist named Manfred Zimmerman.
Right, the sensory data.
Yeah, he estimates that our sensory organs are absorbing data at an astronomical rate. Our eyes can pick up 10 million bits of information per second.
Just the eyes.
Just the eyes. Our skin picks up 1 million bits. Our ears absorb 100,000 bits.
This is the crux of the cognitive bottleneck. Your sensory nervous system is absorbing over 11 million bits of data every single second, but your conscious, rational mind can only process 120 of them.
That's a massive discrepancy.
Therefore, your brain has to employ incredibly aggressive, continuous mental filters to determine what actually matters and what should be ignored.
So my brain is essentially acting like an extreme bouncer at the door of an exclusive nightclub.
I love that.
There's a line of 11 million people, sights, sounds, temperatures, thoughts trying to get in every second, and the bouncer is only allowed to let 120 of them through the door.
That is a brilliant analogy. And now, consider the energy cost of that bouncer. Maintaining those filters, making those split-second judgments about what is important, and focusing that narrow 120-bit spotlight requires immense physical resources.
It's physical work for the brain.
It literally burns glucose in the brain. Every piece of information you evaluate, every choice you make, contributes to a creeping mental fatigue.
Which brings us to the Atlassian article on decision fatigue. This is where the standard morning routine really starts to bankrupt us before we even reach the office.
According to Atlassian, drawing on the foundational research of social psychologist Roy F. Baumeister, the average adult makes an astonishing 35,000 conscious and subconscious decisions every single day.
35,000 decisions, that sounds almost impossible until you break it down.
It encompasses everything. Do I hit snooze or get up? Do I look at this notification or ignore it? Do I wear the blue shirt or the white one?
Do I make eggs or pour cereal?
Do I take the highway or the back roads to avoid traffic? Baumeister's research demonstrated that the brain acts very much like a muscle in this regard.
It gets tired.
Self-control, willpower, and the ability to make rational choices deteriorate over time from repeated exertion. The mere act of making decisions drains your willpower.
I love looking at this mechanically. It's like our brain wakes up with a daily budget of decision dollars.
Precision dollars, right?
Let's say I start the day with a budget of 100 decision dollars. When the alarm goes off, I spend $1 deciding whether to snooze. I spend $5 standing in front of my closet agonizing over what outfit feels right today.
Very relatable.
I spend another $5 deciding what to eat, another $10 navigating unexpected traffic, and $20 deciding how to respond to those non-urgent emails I opened in bed.
And the balance drops.
Rapidly. By the time I actually sit down at my desk to do the heavy lifting of my actual profession, my budget is entirely gone. I have no currency left to spend on my job.
The decision dollars metaphor aligns perfectly with the clinical concept of ego depletion. When your brain is tired from spending all that currency on trivial morning choices, it enters a state of energy conservation.
It just wants to save whatever is left.
And a cognitively fatigued brain conserves energy in one of two very predictable ways. It either makes reckless, impulsive decisions that require no deep thought, or it completely shuts down and refuses to make any decision at all.
Which leads directly to the parole board study mentioned in the Atlassian piece.
Yeah.
I have to say, this is one of the most sobering and slightly terrifying studies I've ever encountered.
It's a profound illustration of decision fatigue in high-stakes environments. Researchers analyzed the rulings made by an Israeli prison parole board.
These aren't amateurs.
No, these are highly trained, experienced judges whose sole job is to assess the risk of granting a prisoner parole. The researchers found a staggering pattern. Prisoners who appeared before the board early in the morning, when the judges were fresh, were granted parole roughly 70% of the time.
70%. A solid majority.
But as the day wore on and the judges were forced to make complex decision after complex decision, the approval rate plummeted.
By how much?
For prisoners who appeared late in the afternoon, the parole grant rate dropped to nearly 10%.
From 70 down to 10. And it is crucial to clarify here, as the Atlassian article points out, the researchers found no evidence of malice, intentional bias, or a sudden change in the severity of the crimes.
Correct. The researchers concluded the drop was a pure manifestation of decision fatigue. Granting parole is a high-risk, cognitively demanding decision. It requires analyzing complex data and predicting future behavior.
Right. It takes a lot of decision dollars.
Exactly. Denying parole, however, is the status quo. It's the safe, low-energy default choice. When the judges' brains ran out of decision dollars, they simply defaulted to the choice that required zero cognitive exertion. They said no.
They hit the default button because their 120-bit processor was overheating. And if decision fatigue can so thoroughly compromise highly trained judges with human lives hanging in the balance, it's undeniably affecting us at our laptops.
Unquestionably. At an organizational level, decision fatigue is exactly what turns capable, intelligent leaders into administrative bottlenecks.
How does that play out in an office?
As Atlassian highlights, managers who field hundreds of minor requests and questions all morning eventually hit a cognitive wall. To avoid the massive mental load of making a wrong choice when they are exhausted, they fall into analysis paralysis.
They just stop deciding.
They make no choice. They leave the email unread, they delay the project approval, and the entire team stalls.
Okay, let's refocus on our single listener. Think about the journey they've been on before 9 a.m.
It's a lot.
They survived the hormonal imbalance of poor sleep. They absorbed the dopamine spike and the Zeigarnik loops from their phone. They burned through half their decision dollars just getting dressed and commuting. And now, finally, they sit down at their desk, they close the extraneous tabs, they take a deep breath, and they try to focus on writing that important report.
But they can't instantly lock in.
Right. Because there's a lingering ghost haunting their attention.
That ghost is largely generated by a pervasive cultural myth that we're forced to operate under, the myth of multitasking.
We have an incredible source that explores this deeply. The empirical study from the Central University of Punjab titled Exploring the Impact of Digital Distraction on Learning.
This study is incredibly revealing because of its subject matter. It looks specifically at university students, digital natives who have literally grown up with multiple devices in their hands.
The researchers conducted a rigorous qualitative analysis, right?
Yes, doing in-depth, semi-structured interviews with students from the 2022 to 2024 academic batches. They started with a massive population of 880 students and pulled a highly representative sample of 300.
A sample size of 300 qualitative interviews provides a very granular look at daily habits. And the dominant behavioral pattern they found is that these students exist in a state of constant attempted multitasking.
Whether they are sitting in a lecture hall, studying in the library, or engaged in academic discussions, they are attempting to blend heavy cognitive processing with constant digital stimulation.
They're listening to a professor while a smartwatch buzzes on their wrist. A laptop is open to a lecture slide, and a smartphone is under the desk cycling through WhatsApp, Instagram, and Snapchat.
It's sensory overload.
But here's the thing. I know people who swear they are exceptional at this. They genuinely believe that juggling 3 screens makes them hyper-efficient. What is the actual neurological reality of this behavior?
The neurological reality, as the science unequivocally proves, is that human multitasking is a biological myth.
A myth.
The conscious brain cannot process 2 complex streams of information simultaneously. Remember the 120-bit limit?
All right, the bouncer at the club.
What these students and what we as professionals are actually doing is rapid context switching. We are rapidly shifting our 120-bit spotlight back and forth between the professor and the smartphone.
And what did the Punjab study find about that?
The study notes that this frantic shifting shatters the students' attention span. The data showed their continuous focus dropped to a mere 3 to 5 minutes before an interruption occurred.
3 to 5 minutes. You can barely formulate a single cohesive paragraph of thought in 3 minutes. You certainly can't achieve deep understanding.
Exactly. And the Wikipedia source on attention management corroborates the physical cost of this. Shifting your attention back and forth doesn't just fracture your time, it actively metabolizes glucose from the brain.
Oh, wow. So it's burning physical fuel.
Every time you switch contexts, your brain has to load a new set of rules and memories into its working cache. This burns physical energy.
This is why you can sit relatively motionless in an ergonomic chair all day, doing 0 physical labor, and feel completely physically worn out by 5 p.m.
Your brain has been redlining its energy reserves, trying to jump between dozens of different contexts.
The physical drain makes sense. But it gets even worse because of a concept that both Skill Oxide and the Wikipedia article highlight. It's a phenomenon called attention residue.
Yes.
I think this is the most critical concept for understanding modern distraction. What exactly is attention residue?
Attention residue is a term coined by business researcher Sophie Leroy. It explains the lag time that occurs when you shift your focus from a distraction back to your primary task.
Give me an example of how that looks.
Let's say you're deep into writing a complex financial report. Your phone buzzes, and you take just 10 seconds to read a text message about dinner plans.
Just 10 seconds.
Then you look back at your report. You assume your attention has immediately returned to the spreadsheet.
Right, I'm looking at the numbers again.
But it hasn't. A residue of your cognitive capacity is left behind, still lingering on the text message, processing the implications of those dinner plans.
So my 120 bits of processing power is now fractured. Maybe 80 bits are trying to calculate the spreadsheet, but 40 bits are still stuck in the background thinking about whether we should get Italian or Thai food.
Precisely. You are forcing yourself to operate at a diminished cognitive capacity. You're permanently running in a lower gear.
That's incredibly inefficient.
And the most shocking statistic from the research on attention residue is the recovery time.
How long does it take?
Studies have shown that after you get distracted by an unrelated task, it takes an average of 25 minutes to regain full, uncompromised focus on your original task.
25 minutes. Okay, I have to push back on this from a purely practical standpoint. I hear this 25-minute statistic cited often, but look at the reality of a modern office.
I know it sounds unworkable.
I have to jump between an Excel spreadsheet, a Teams Slack channel, and my email client just to do my job. If it literally takes 25 minutes to refocus every single time I glance at a Slack message, how does anyone ever get anything done? Are we just mathematically doomed to never achieve focus?
That is the essential question, and it requires us to draw a sharp distinction between necessary workflow transitions and unnecessary context switches.
Okay, what's the difference?
Moving from a spreadsheet to a relevant team chat to ask a specific targeted question about the data in that spreadsheet is a workflow transition. You are shifting tools, but you are staying within the exact same broad cognitive context.
The ultimate goal of the task remains the same.
Correct. The brain doesn't have to load a completely new set of rules. But an unnecessary context switch, like leaving your personal email notifications active while trying to write a proposal.
Or having 15 unrelated browser tabs open just in case, which Skill Oxide specifically warns against in their habit number 1.
Yes, that forces a complete cognitive break. It forces your brain into a state described by researchers as continuous partial attention.
Continuous partial attention. That sounds like a miserable way to exist.
It is exhausting. It means you are never fully present with any single task, and you're never fully relaxed either. You are perpetually hovering in a state of high alert mediocrity.
High alert mediocrity. That hits hard.
And if you're trapped in continuous partial attention, achieving what psychologist Csikszentmihalyi calls a flow state becomes mathematically impossible.
Flow state being that highly productive feeling of complete energized absorption in a task.
Yes. You simply do not have the unfragmented bits of attention required to enter flow. Your brain is too busy constantly scanning the horizon for the next interruption.
The Punjab study really brings the real-world consequences of this continuous partial attention to life. The students who were constantly multitasking and battling attention residue didn't just experience minor delays.
No, the effects were severe.
The researchers noted significantly decreased academic performance, lower grades, and a systemic failure to recall information during exams. And the damage spilled over from their academics into their physical and mental health.
The constant barrage of notifications, combined with the social pressure to respond instantly, led to widespread anxiety, elevated stress levels, and, looping back to our beginning, severe sleep disorders.
The Punjab study also highlighted a fascinating, often overlooked external factor: infrastructure reliability.
Right, the network drops.
They found that when students were attempting to learn online and the internet connection was unstable, when the network dropped or lagged, it caused massive spikes in frustration and anxiety. The very technology we rely on to work and learn becomes a massive source of physiological stress when it fails.
It adds another layer of unpredictability to an already overwhelmed nervous system.
So we have thoroughly, perhaps painfully, diagnosed the problem. We have walked step by step through the invisible gauntlet of pre-work traps.
We really have.
We've seen how revenge bedtime procrastination and social jet lag bankrupt our energy. We've seen how the morning dopamine spike and open Zeigarnik loops put us in a reactive state. We've quantified the exhaustion of decision fatigue and the glucose-draining reality of attention residue.
It does sound incredibly bleak when stacked up sequentially like that.
It feels overwhelming. I feel like I need a nap just summarizing the sheer volume of things attacking our focus. But this is the deep dive, and our philosophy is that we never leave our listeners stranded in the depths of a problem.
No, we have to provide a way out.
We have identified the mechanisms. Now, how do we actively fix them? Let's equip you with an arsenal of practical habits drawn from our sources to build a cognitive firewall and protect your attention.
The most logical place to begin is by plugging the leaks. If decision fatigue is draining our decision dollars before we even reach the office, we must systematically minimize pre-work decisions. We have to automate the morning.
Both the Atlassian article and Hugh Culver's piece hammer this point home: the power of rigid routines. Atlassian specifically points out why highly visible leaders, like Steve Jobs or Barack Obama, became famous for wearing the exact same clothes every single day.
And it certainly wasn't a lack of fashion sense or resources. As Obama himself explained in interviews, he only wore gray or blue suits because he had too many other vastly more important decisions to make regarding national security and policy.
He protected his decision dollars.
He flatly refused to waste a single bit of his cognitive bandwidth deciding what to wear or what to eat for breakfast. He automated the trivial to preserve energy for the critical.
So, translated for the listener, this means aggressively paring down menial morning choices. Pick out your clothes the night before.
Meal prep your breakfast so you just have to grab it.
Establish a strict, non-negotiable morning routine so you can essentially operate on a healthy, low-energy autopilot until you sit at your desk.
But I know there's friction here. It's easy to say, prep your clothes the night before, but when you are exhausted at 11 p.m. and dealing with revenge bedtime procrastination, the last thing you want to do is iron a shirt.
Right.
The key is to make the nighttime prep as frictionless as possible. And Hugh Culver adds a brilliant high-leverage habit to this nighttime routine. Set your primary goal the night before.
Right. He advises taking just 5 minutes before you shut down your computer for the night to jot down the exact, specific task you are going to tackle first thing the next morning.
If you wait until you wake up to decide, what should I work on today, you are immediately burning willpower. You are inviting that analysis paralysis we discussed with the parole judges.
Because you have to evaluate options.
By deciding the night before, you wake up with absolute crystalline clarity. You completely bypass the decision fatigue and transition seamlessly from autopilot into execution mode.
Okay, so we've automated the routine to save decision dollars. Next, we have to look at managing the physical environment of the biological brain itself, because, as we established, maintaining that 120-bit attention filter requires physical energy.
It does.
Skill oxide drops a very simple, yet often ignored, biological fact in their habit number 7. The brain is composed of roughly 75% water.
Yes. Hydration is not just a wellness trend, it is a cognitive necessity. If you wake up mildly dehydrated, which almost everyone does after 8 hours of sleep, the energy production of your brain drops immediately.
What does that feel like?
You'll feel sluggish, your memory will be foggy, and your ability to maintain focus will be severely compromised. The simplest intervention is to aggressively hydrate before you attempt to operate.
And what about fuel? We talked earlier about ghrelin and leptin causing cravings. How do we manage food for focus?
The Atlassian piece points out that hunger is scientifically and clinically linked to impulsive decision-making. When your blood glucose levels drop, your self-control and willpower plummet alongside it.
You get hangry.
You get hangry and you lose focus. They recommend that before tackling a decision-heavy task, you should eat a healthy snack that provides a stable, slow release of glucose, like a piece of fruit or a handful of nuts.
So no donuts.
No donuts.
Yep.
The slow release stabilizes your blood sugar and physically restores the willpower muscle.
Now, I have to ask about the absolute elephant in the room when we're talking about morning routines, energy, and the modern worker. Coffee.
Coffee.
I love my morning coffee. Skill oxide addresses this directly in Habit 6. How does caffeine actually interact with our attention systems?
Caffeine is a powerful tool, but it's often deeply misunderstood and misused. Skill Oxide, quoting productivity author Chris Bailey, outlines the strategic, almost clinical use of caffeine. And the most crucial takeaway is that there is a very specific biological threshold.
What's the threshold?
Consuming up to 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is roughly equivalent to 2 standard cups of coffee, is highly beneficial for focus. It has been proven to block adenosine.
What's adenosine?
Adenosine is the chemical that makes you feel tired. By blocking it, caffeine boosts intense focus, increases endurance on tedious tasks, and even temporarily improves short-term memory. It helps facilitate that hyper-focus mode.
2 cups is the magic number. But what happens if I'm dragging and I decide to have 4 cups?
That is precisely where the tool becomes a weapon against your focus.
Oh.
Consuming anything over 400 milligrams pushes your nervous system past the point of optimal arousal.
So you get the jitters.
It begins to drastically diminish your focus. It triggers the release of adrenaline, which increases anxiety, makes you physically jittery, and completely shatters your ability to concentrate on singular, complex tasks.
Wow.
Furthermore, because caffeine has a half-life of roughly 5 to 6 hours, consuming any after 5 p.m. ensures it will still be in your system at bedtime.
Which feeds right back into that cycle of delayed sleep and social jet lag we discussed at the very beginning. Strategic caffeine. Treat it like a prescription, not a beverage. I love that. Okay, so our physical body is hydrated, our glucose is stable, we are strategically caffeinated, and we know exactly what our first task is because we planned it last night.
You are primed.
Now we have to tame the external digital environment. How do we stop the dopamine hits and prevent those Zeigarnik loops from opening?
That requires establishing ruthless digital boundaries. Skill Oxide's Habit 4 is foundational. You must turn off all non-essential notifications and alerts.
All of them.
Every time a device buzzes, flashes, or pings, it is essentially a third party attempting to reach into your environment and control your attention. By disabling those alerts at the system level, you prevent those psychological Zeigarnik loops from ever opening in the first place. You cannot be distracted by a loop you never saw.
And their habit 10 is equally vital. Externalize your to-do list. Get it out of your head and onto paper.
Yes. As David Allen famously said, your brain is designed for having ideas, not for holding them. Your working memory is a processor, not a storage drive.
If you try to hold all your pending tasks, grocery lists, and project steps in your working memory,
You fill up your attentional space. You use up a massive chunk of those precious 120 bits per second just trying not to forget things. By writing them down in a trusted external system, you literally free up your cognitive hard drive to actually execute the work.
how should we structure the workday itself once we sit down? The Atlassian article mentions a fascinating concept called the maker versus manager schedule.
This is a powerful concept for batching work and preventing attention residue. A maker schedule requires large, continuous blocks of time, 2 to 3 hours dedicated exclusively to deep, creative, uninterrupted work, writing, coding, designing.
And the manager schedule.
A manager schedule is chopped into 30-minute blocks for meetings, emails, and collaborative strategy. The key to focus is to strictly separate these modes.
So don't try to write a proposal while checking email every 10 minutes.
Exactly. By batching all your emails and meetings into the afternoon, you protect your morning from the rapid context switching that drains your brain's glucose. You can also enforce this by setting personal, hard deadlines for decisions, which forces your brain to finalize choices and permanently close open loops.
If a listener is absorbing all of this right now and they feel a bit overwhelmed by the sheer number of habits we've discussed, from sleep hygiene to hydration to dopamine management, if they can only commit to changing one single thing tomorrow morning to reclaim their focus, what is the absolute highest ROI habit they can adopt?
If you change only one variable in your routine, adopt the first-hour rule.
The first hour rule. Let's dig into that.
The rule is simple, though executing it requires discipline. Keep your smartphone on airplane mode or entirely in another room for the first full hour you are awake.
Just 1 hour.
Do not check your email. Do not look at the news. Do not open social media. Use that pure, uninterrupted hour to execute the singular goal you set the night before. Focus your higher quality, most fully charged cognitive energy entirely on creating value rather than reacting to the agendas of others.
That ties perfectly back to Skill Oxide's Habit 8, which discusses the paradigm of being busy versus being productive. They quote the legendary management consultant Peter Drucker, who said, "There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all."
That quote is the perfect encapsulation of the morning trap. Rapidly replying to 50 non-urgent emails before 9 a.m. makes you feel incredibly busy. It provides a false sense of momentum.
But if those emails did not actually advance your most important complex projects, you were not productive.
You merely burned your freshest, most valuable cognitive resources on other people's priorities. By fiercely protecting that first hour, you guarantee that your best energy is applied to your highest value work.
That is such a powerful reframing. Okay, let's take a moment to summarize this incredible journey we've been on through these sources. We started the night before, uncovering how the psychological rebellion of revenge, bedtime procrastination, and the weekly disruption of social jet lag leave us with a compounding sleep debt.
In a state of hormonal chaos, specifically regarding leptin and ghrelin, before the sun even comes up.
We then mapped out the morning trap, examining how a groggy, depleted brain desperately seeks a cheap dopamine hit from digital devices.
We saw how giving in to that craving instantly throws us into a reactive state, serving others' agendas, and opens exhausting psychological Zeigarnik loops that drain our willpower.
We quantified the invisible cognitive cost of our mornings, learning the physical limits of our hardware, that our conscious brain can only process 120 bits of information per second.
We saw how making trivial choices about clothes and commuting depletes our daily budget of decision dollars, leading to the kind of severe decision fatigue that paralyzed those parole judges.
We identified the lingering ghost of distraction. We used the Punjab study to dismantle the myth of multitasking, revealing it to be nothing more than glucose-draining rapid context switching.
And we learned about attention residue, realizing that a single glance at a text message can hijack our focus for up to 25 minutes.
And finally, we laid the blueprints for a cognitive firewall. We learned to protect our decision dollars by planning the night before. We optimized the hardware by hydrating and using caffeine strategically below the 400 milligram threshold.
We tamed the digital environment by shutting off notifications, externalizing our memory, and fiercely protecting that first hour to create value instead of just simulating busyness.
The overarching, undeniable lesson from synthesizing all this research is that your attention is not an unlimited magical resource. It is a finite, biological, and highly fragile asset.
You cannot take it for granted. You have to actively, intentionally defend it every single day.
You absolutely do. You have the power to protect that 120 bits per second processing capacity by designing your mornings with intention. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, totally novel thought that really struck me as we were piecing the underlying mechanisms of these sources together.
What's that?
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about the limits of the human brain. But consider the trajectory of our environment. Right now, our brains max out at 120 bits per second, and we are struggling to manage the 11 million bits of sensory input bombarding us. But the digital world is only getting louder, faster, and more demanding. So my question for you to ponder is this. Are we approaching a breaking point where society will have to legally treat attention as a protected resource?
Oh, wow.
Just as we have OSHA regulations to protect workers from physical hazards, like toxic chemicals or dangerous machinery, will the future workplace require cognitive safety regulations? Will it become illegal for a company to demand instantaneous responses or for an app to utilize casino-style variable reward schedules to extract your dopamine?
Or, alternatively, will the next phase of human evolution be a biological adaptation? A brain that physically evolves to natively process 500 bits per second just to survive the digital age.
It is a profound speculation. Whether through regulation or evolution, the sheer physics of our attention will have to adapt to the reality of the information age. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the research. We hope mapping out these hidden traps empowers you to take back your mornings, build your cognitive firewall, and finally break the invisible cycle of sabotage.
Remember, you don't lose focus while working, you lose it before you even begin.
Until next time, stay focused.